the section on the mechanics of evolution, otherwise known as Darwinian evolution, highlighting the work of your boy, Charles Darwin. All right, now Darwin did not only suggest that species evolved, he also suggested how that evolution might have occurred. Darwin thought that the mechanism, which is why we called this, and the regions calls it this, mechanism of evolution was like a process of artificial selection practiced by breeders of animals. And he used the term natural selection to indicate that the process of evolution was controlled by nature rather than by people, which would have been artificial selection, which we call now selective breeding. So in the process of natural selection, individuals that survive are able to breed and pass their genetic information to the next generation. And those that are not as successful in the environment often die without leaving any offspring. So we're going to take a look at really one mechanism of evolution, but I wanted to let you know by doing this, evolutionary theories began coming out in the 1800s as new geological and biological discoveries, reformed existing knowledge. Previously, the dominant evolutionary theory was described as, but the word was fixity of species, that they were fixed, immutable, unchanging. Man was always man, something like that. There are two theories to take a look at, but really Darwin in the end. All right. Now, Jean-Baptiste Lamarck, as you can see, there's a video clip. Let me hide this down here. There's a video clip I'm going to attach to this. I want you to watch, and one on Darwin as well, above and beyond the Amoeba Sisters. Jean-Baptiste Lamarck was a French scientist, and what he did was propose that a species changed as a result of habitual use or disuse of a particular feature. So excessive use would cause that feature, take a look at the giraffe there, that would cause that feature to develop, while continued disuse would cause it to atrophy. Atrophy means similar to shrinking muscles. Lamarck proposed that these modifications, these features, could be passed on to successive generations over time. All right, that's why we go with Darwin now, because his theory is essentially flawed. The one I can think of is, taking a knife and cutting off the tail of a rat does not produce tailless offspring. So acquired the theory of use and disuse with Lamarck. All right, so natural selection. All right, now let's go on over to Darwin's natural selection. That's where I was a second ago. So his overview. So Darwin's ideas are really easy to understand. The component of it really says this. In any environment, an individual may be born with characteristics that make it stronger, faster, basically any sort of advantage that will help it survive and reproduce. All right, so that's what natural selection is, one part of his theory. So watch that video clip and come back. Okay, you watched it, so let's come back and take a look. All right, so this is the current mechanism for evolution, is not Lamarck's use and disuse, but natural selection. The best traits in a given environment will be passed on to the next generation. All right, and the tenet within that is called survival of the fittest. Organisms with the right stuff will thrive, and organisms whose traits are not suitable will be unable to pass them on. Really, it's passing on of the genes. And fitness is not actually physical fitness, but the ability to reproduce successfully. All right, so let's take a look here. So I summed up this year for us natural selection. I'm going to put a thing on here, natural selection here in a few. And there might be a little bit more on successive slides about these things, so leave a little room to write. All right, overproduction. All right. So natural selection is the broad category. All right. Under natural selection, we talk about, all right, the overproduction. All right. And overproduction simply means there is a finite or limited supply of resources needed for life. All right. And that means that the environment can't support everything that's needed, so that there is a struggle for survival. All right, struggle for survival brings on competition over resources. We'll go over what some of those resources are. That's why I'm keeping mum at this point. And organisms best fit to survive will survive. Best fit for the environment, that environment will survive. And they will reproduce. I don't know what that is. They're adaptive. All right, they will reproduce, all right, and pass on the genes that have those organisms able to survive with. And sometimes it causes the creation of a new species, which is referred to as a speciation. Darwin's finches, the beaks of the finches, which we'll take a little video up to. All right. I don't really know what's going on with the smartboard thing here over with the words on this side, but we'll go on anyhow and take this off. All right. So these should be followed in order: overproduction, struggle, competition, survival, survives, reproduces, maybe creates a new species, which promotes variation, both in genes and the species. What are the known sources of variation, evolution-wise? Mutation, any change in the base sequence that we just covered in molecular biology, and a genetic recombination during fertilization and meiosis, also known as gene shuffling. All right? So the overview, let's bring it all the way down. The overview of natural selection. You have to pardon the people who are doing the work out here. Let me close the door. I'm too far into it to stop this. All right? So if you hear the lawnmowers or the blowers behind me, my apologies. It's a summer job for somebody. David Duchich, maybe Eli, all right? Maybe Mika. Let's get on out there. It's natural selection. If you want to understand what it is, all right, with this, take this one that I'm saying, To the Amoeba Sisters short video. Listen to that with the good picture she has and the other. This needs to be watched with video, all right, with video. All right, so, all right, another one here, another video clip. I want you to stop here and take a look at the evolution of the peppered moth. All right, the peppered moth. And what the peppered moth was, I'm going to give you my overview of the peppered moth. We talk about the Industrial Revolution, all right, and the difference between two different kinds of moths. Industrial Revolution, a lot of factories, a lot of soot being placed on trees, tree barks and branches darkened, and the white moth that you see here stood out and started getting eaten, food for birds and stuff. And so those white moth had needed to adapt fairly quickly, and it did. Our Industrial Revolution went by, better clean air laws in the 1950s brought back the white moth, or the gray moth, actually. All right, so there's a video clip as an example for quick natural selection. Not like human natural selection, although I suppose if we needed it, we would actually, go there. And that's called a selection pressure in the end. If you talk about the moths here, the selection pressure being the environment here that the moth had to go through. All right, so apologize. So please, the videos are important to watch here. Whenever you see video clip, stop and look. This one here, again, I'll spell it out for you there, put it in. Peppered moth video. Watch that. It's about 2 minutes long. All right, so that you get a clear understanding of what we mean here. Regents asked that. I'm going to be using Regents questions for this all Regents questions for this last test on the 12th of June. All right, there you see it again. Now notice the dark moth standing out. Once the clean air laws came back, dark moth standing out, white moth or gray moth came back. You see how the gray moth, if you go back, would have blended in with that environment. Would have blended in with it, but it didn't. There, make that larger so you can see it a little better. Would have blended in. All right, white moth. You can see them both. They both still exist. Now remember, we're not talking about extinct. Don't use that word too often. They didn't go extinct. The genes just shuffle. They change, which means during the time of the Industrial Revolution, there were more black moths than there were white. The genes for that, bigger in the environment than white. Now it's a little bit more evened out. You don't want to be food. You got to change. All right, variation. Take a look at the variations here. Sexual reproduction and mutations. By sexual reproduction, we mean fertilization, and before fertilization, meiosis, the form of all variations. Don't get hooked on the M word, which barely happens. All right, mutations. Moving on. All right, the results of genetic variation could be structural changes. Structural changes over the term, if you're evolving from sea animals to land animals, different uses, all right, for different animals. Notice the coat right here, not only the paws, which actually have an adaptation to keep it warm, there's fur down there, but the coat to blend in with the snow, structural changes, functional changes of biochemistry. All right, there are video clips coming up on all of this stuff. It's so important in this one because that's what I would have done in class. There's not much to write here, but a lot to see and to understand of the changes here. So changes brought on by the genetic changes brought on by survival of the fittest. The 3 ways, I'm going to make this view a little smaller there. So let's go to 100 here so we can get them all on. So the destruction can either be a structural change, a functional change, which results from a different protein, or a behavioral change. Please watch the changes of genetic variation. All right, so we're going to stop this one here and then talk about the finches in the next screencast.